Hey everybody, welcome to my Suburban Oasis. Well, I thought today was a good day for a garden tour, and here we are in mid-Michigan in a Zone 5B, and my name is Soleil, and this is my Suburban Oasis, and I've been hearing from lots of you about all of your beautiful oases that you have created, and I'm so pleased to hear about the inspiration that you get and the motivation that you get, because I also get it from all of you. So thank you so much for watching. Today we're going to, as I said, just do a garden tour. I have a few updates to do, and I thought we'd start with the hydrangeas on the deck because I got some requests just to give updates on how they're doing. So this is my little lime hydrangea that has been growing in a pot. This is its second year, and I just leave it out to overwinter. And it's looking really beautiful right now, and even starting to take on some of that pink tinge, and we still have a few blooms that are coming yet. So we still have plenty of season left for hydrangeas. Now also on the other side of my deck, I have a Diamond Rouge hydrangea that I was asked to give updates on. And so this one is also doing really well. And I don't think the lighting's that great right now, but it is definitely very well on its way to coloring up for fall. And we even have a new bloom coming yet here that is very white still, but more to come with this one. But I think it's definitely in some of its final stages of color for the season. Gorgeous, gorgeous hydrangea, and you'll see it looks much different planted in the garden in the soil. So we'll show you that one in just a minute. Now I do also have clematis in some pots around both the deck and out in the front that I plan to pot out this season. And I definitely am waiting for a little bit of cooler temperatures. We did heat up again a little bit. It's been cool at night, but it's also still really dry. So I've actually had to pull some of the hoses back out this week to water some things in the garden that had been transplanted recently because they were getting a little wilty, unfortunately. So hopefully we'll get some rain soon and we can get some more dividing and transplanting done. I have put my very small little incredible hydrangea down in the ground here, and I protected it with this cloche. And I'm hoping that that will just kind of finish off this row of hydrangeas because I think it's just missing. I really love the structure and form of the bark on this fine line buckthorn, but I also would really like to see that height continued over here. And this is where I planted the boxwood that I took out for one of the little haughty hydrangeas that we planted recently. Most of my irises are looking good in the pots here, just about ready to be planted out. They all look like they have plenty of green growth for that. But again, I'm waiting until it gets a little bit more moist, just so I don't have to rely on any watering, but they do like it to be fairly dry once they're transplanted. So I think this bed is just looking really nice, and the sedum that I put in here when I pulled out the strawberry Sunday hydrangea is starting to color up and put on some of those pink tones. And we're getting some nice reblooming from some of the salvia here. We have a giant stalk on this one. This is the Azure Snow variety, and then next to that is the Crystal Blue variety. And then back behind it we have gorgeous asters that are blooming. I just love the colors purple and green together. Aren't they beautiful? And then the butterfly bush that I transplanted because it was getting too much shade is over here, and it's doing really well. It's got a lot of buds on it still, and I just deadheaded it, so you can't see any blooms on it, but it's definitely happier in its new space. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that does next year. Over here in the pot that we just put together, the little haughty hydrangea is looking good. It did have this, this was a clearance plant, and it did have these brown florets on it before because it had been underwatered. But it's doing really well, and the neon sedum in front of it is starting to bloom, and the angelonia are happy also. So I think it's a nice combination. I did get a lot of questions after I showed this because people were not sure about having a hydrangea and a sedum together in a pot because of the water needs, but they both do like well draining soil, and the paniculata hydrangea is the least water, has the lowest water requirements of all the hydrangea types that I've ever grown. So it's definitely happy in this pot, and I probably will plant it out in the garden maybe towards the end of the year next year, but we'll see. If it is happy in this pot and does really well like the other one did, I might just keep it in there for several years because I enjoy having it right next to the bench. It provides a little bit of blockage of the sun in the late day when I want to sit out and listen to the fountain. And speaking of the fountain, this garden is doing really well also. It's funny, after we got that last rain, the strawberry Sunday hydrangea put out these beautiful little white tips on almost every single one of the blooms. I'm not sure if you can see that very well, but it was like, oh, that felt so good, and just pushed out about 5 new blooms at the end of each panicle. Super cute. And then the buds on the all the rage roses are starting to open finally. We have lots of buds on them. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of these gorgeous blooms because they are such a beautiful color. And we have the berry white hydrangea in this area in front of a raspberry bush. And the berry white hydrangea is looking lovely. It still has quite a few stems on it that may yet get blooms. So lots of different ages of blooms on this plant. And then you can see all of the beautiful raspberries that are growing here. And these are a golden raspberry. So I'm looking forward to them. They're super delicious. I am not going to go into this area right now. I see that the yellow jackets are still a little angry. We had a bit of an infestation in the compost bin, and they stung me too just this week, and had to go to urgent care because I get reactions to yellow jackets, so that wasn't fun. But I don't know if you can see back there, the sedum is blooming and it's a gorgeous color, and the strawberry Sunday hydrangea in this corner is really looking fresh, and because it is in part shade instead of full sun, it definitely is a little behind in terms of putting on color. But I just love that about having different plants that are in different areas of the garden that kind of progress at different times. It allows you to enjoy the garden throughout the seasons so well. And this light is really harsh right now, but the rose marvel salvia here is putting on a nice show. I think this is about the 3rd time that it's bloomed this season. I just love the blooms on it. They're gorgeous. The pollinators love them too. This clematis has really taken hold this year, and although we didn't get any flowers, I fully expect that next year we're going to get a good show out of that one. So I'm excited to see what it looks like next year. And these false cypress, these mophead false cypress here on either side of this strawberry Sunday hydrangea, I think just offset it really nicely. It's a nice pop of color, and they provide great evergreen color in the wintertime as well. I still have not cleaned up my hanging baskets yet, but I do plan to get to them. I'm having a bit of trouble these days with the rabbit. He thinks that this is his garden and not mine, and he's eating my lilies. So we'll see what's left of those next year. They gave me a good show this year, so even if it was just 1 year, it was worth it. And the bunnies have to eat. And I guess he thinks this is a safe spot. We still have this beautiful cappuccino rudbeckia right here. And this is just putting on a whole bunch more blooms after I clipped it and made a beautiful bouquet just from it. And so I'm really happy with how long the flowering period is for this one. Definitely a winner in my book. And in this area, I have transplanted some pulmonaria. So my goal is to eventually get rid of these hostas that are back here. They're just filler. What they're doing right now is trying to just make sure I'm preventing things from coming in under the neighbor's fence here. Things that I might not want. And then I want to have this beautiful silvery foliage of the samurai lungwort, and it's looking pretty droopy and floppy, but I'm glad to be able to show you that because that is what lungwort looks like after you transplant it, and you do just have to water it. Eventually it becomes incredibly drought resistant, but in the beginning it flops like crazy and you'll think it's never going to live. But it just takes a little water to keep it going, and you have to do it for about a week. At least that's been my experience. So the strawberry hydrangea did get some shock after its transplant. Not horrible. And I do think that I may get some blooms yet on some of the ends of the stems that don't have any yet, so that should be nice. Just trying to, still work on this area of the garden. You can see I'm getting that second flush of dianthus blooms that I talked about earlier this year. It's a little later than normal, but these bright purple blooms or pink blooms in the springtime and now are just a welcome addition to the garden. Always so cheery. Now over here we have the autumn joy sedum, and it's so beautiful. It's starting to color up. This year, to be able to show you the difference and for you to be able to think about what you want to do with yours, I did the Chelsea chop or chopped back this sedum in June. So you can see what it does is it just creates a more compact and tightly branched plant with more blooms that have a little bit sturdier of stems. And it's kind of a little more rounded because I actually shaped it that way when I pruned it. But it's also less likely to flop. This one doesn't look like it's going to fully flap, but you can see how much more open the branching is in that one when you look at the top of it in comparison to the tightly packed blooms on this one. So a fairly big difference. It does look like I need to come in and give this firelight some water as well. You can see that hydrangeas need water if they're paniculata when their leaves start to point downward like that and droop. So that one's only been in the ground for a couple of weeks, but as I said, it's just been really dry these last couple of weeks, dry and windy. Luckily it's been cool at night, or it would be even worse. I even think this Diamond Rouge hydrangea could use some water. I don't think we've had a really good rain for a couple weeks. But this is the other one that I was talking about, and you can see how far behind it is from the one that's on the deck. In addition to that, you'll see that the blooms have bigger florets, and they also, gosh, I don't know how to explain this, but they're just a little bit less tightly packed, if that makes sense, because it's not in the direct sun from sun up to sundown, because this one gets part sun because it faces west, and the other one gets completely full sun. So the other one is much more dense, and this one is a little bit more loose and open. And then we have the limelight hydrangea that we just planted, which is looking good. So nice to see. And over here, something that's starting to come into bloom is a native plant, which is a white woodland aster, and it has smallest, teeny tiniest blooms on it. but it will be smothered in these blooms very soon. Just very dainty. This back garden is looking amazing, and I have to say, this April, I think it's April night salvia, so it's supposed to bloom before May night salvia. It has been going and going and going, and the pollinators have loved it, and it has provided a beautiful contrast for this firelight hydrangea that we planted out. And the firelight is just blooming now because it was kind of in the shade behind the other one that we just saw when it was in the planter. But now that it is out in the garden, it's so happy. And just look at those stunning blooms, so white and creamy and incredibly large florets. This one does not provide as much interest to the pollinators, but they don't really care right now because they're just interested in that salvia. I made some fairly big changes in this garden bed since the last tour that we did. So if you follow me, you know that I had a whole row of those green and white hostas that I use as filler. And I think this gives a pretty good view of what this bed looks like now, which is all of this is, well, on this side we have the black pearl heuchera, and then we have the bilberry heuchera over there. And I think this dark foliage looks so amazing. Right now it's not contrasting much because the sun is going down, but when the sun is out, this is so beautiful, and it really contrasts nicely with the purple over here and the hydrangea, and I just think it's an awesome change. So I'm super happy with it. Looks like they could use a little bit of water as well. Sorry, I should have watered before I did the tour video, but I think it's good for people to see that everybody struggles with, you know, some watering issues after transplanting, and after there's times where the weather just isn't nice to your garden. This Queen of Hearts over here, the Sprunera, I love it. It has taken off since I put it in the ground. I had it in a container for the first half of the year, and then I put it in the ground about 3 weeks ago, and ooh, it is happy as can be. So now you can see how the little hottie hydrangeas look in the garden. This is where I put the other one so that I have two that kind of flank the entryway to this path. And I think that looks nice. It provides a little bit more height to both of these garden beds, and I did have to move the Weigela that was in this garden bed, so I'll show you where that is at now. But we're definitely getting still our second bloom on these phlox. These are the opening act ultra pink phlox. And then I didn't show you, but over here we have the magic pink aster that is beginning to put on its fall color for us, which is beautiful. And of course the garden phlox behind it, that's the Laura garden phlox, which blooms for several weeks in the fall. And the mahogany monsters, or excuse me, the caramel, the mega caramel heuchera is putting out all of its blooms right now again. Lots of buds happening on our music box rose over here, and one bloom. And I ended up taking out some of the Patriot hostas right here and have split some of this heuchera because I think it looks really pretty underneath it. I just like the contrast of that foliage, a little bit more of a mint green foliage underneath of the phlox and the rose. And it's incredibly good looking foliage. It doesn't ever get tattered or not eaten too much. I shouldn't say that. Probably tonight the rabbit will come out and disappear it. I also moved an astilbe from right here over to the front just to kind of make this drape around the little hottie. As you can see, this Brunnera is also having a little fit about having been divided and planted without much water, so I'll have to water that too after this video. It's just been so dry. I wasn't expecting it because we had rain in the forecast, and I mean, unfortunately, weather in Michigan changes frequently, so you're never really sure what it's going to be like, even 5 minutes in advance sometimes. I do think this back end of the border though is looking amazing. Just look at that foliage. Some people might think that's too tightly planted or packed, but I love the way that it looks with the ferns kind of coming out between the hostas and the heucherellas just kind of draping over the rocks in front. That makes me happy. And here we have the brilliant chartreuse of this grass, which has been very happy this year under the pinky winky, which is still looking fine. And we're still getting blooms on the beautiful pincushion flowers down here. Some beautiful little purple blue flowers. They definitely have a great long bloom period. And this is the Brunnera that I divided, so you can see that one's a little bit droopy as well, but it's doing all right. They're all going to be okay. They just need water. That's why my hoses are kind of sitting out everywhere right now. I haven't put them away. Try to water one area each day this week just to get it done. It's been a week. Didn't those baskets turn out cute? I love how they grew up around the post. Nice and simple, and they turn out good. I had one plant in those that didn't grow, but it really doesn't matter because the other two filled up the space quite nicely. And this area just always looks good to me. I don't really need to do anything with it. I cut back the pulmonaria after they bloom in the spring, and then the rest of the year, I mean, they just do so well on their own. This area is also starting to come together and feel more cohesive. This is where I did end up planting the Weigela, so you'll see right over here. I have some other Weigela in this bed that do really well, the rainbow sensation ones. So I thought this would be a good spot for it. This one is I think it's called Pink Poppins. Anyways, it's supposed to be a reblooming pink Weigela. And that space was just kind of unfilled, and I wasn't happy with how the lily was filling that, and it was a white lily, so I moved it over here with the rest of the white lilies. So that should also help provide a larger impact with those blooms when they're in effect in the summer. So I guess there's lots of changes. I didn't think there was as many as there were until I started talking through this video. And you can see this strawberry Sunday hydrangea from the rain that we got about 2 or 3 weeks ago. That really did stimulate the growth. I also tossed a shovelful of compost on it, and so between those two things it popped out some brand new pretty blooms, even better than the blooms earlier this year. So I'm still anticipating this one will get better and better by the year. Our Pinkadot flax are reblooming again. Nothing from the blush flax. So I'm thinking, I don't know if I'm going to keep the blush flax over here. I think it's just too much sun for them and that they're not really happy with it. I don't know where I'll move them to yet, but I'm thinking about it. And here's some of those coral berries. They're turning pink more and more every week. And this pinky winky hydrangea has turned much more dark pink. It's getting darker and darker every week. We do have a couple more blooms that might be coming out on it, but I think some of that will depend on whether we get some rain or not. This sedum over here was also trimmed back so that it would form a nice mound, and it's a little behind the others because it gets less sun, but just starting to pink up. And I love the way the bloom heads look on those. They're really a great traditional favorite for me. There's always lots of new plants that come out, but when you find one that works for you, stick with it, even if it's something that's been out for 30 years. The little limes are looking good back there. It'll be so fun when they pop up to the height of these cone flowers. That's going to be beautiful with the cone flowers up against those little lime blooms. Yeah, that'll be pretty. And this Weigela is also doing really well over here. All right, let's head out to the front. This garden bed for me has been no muss, no fuss kind of garden bed this year as well, but it has gotten, fairly full. So what I do plan to do is come in and take out this hosta, and then there's another one that's kind of hiding back here just to give a little more space for those boxwoods. And then I want to come in and, boy, I don't know. I'm trying to decide. I think I'm going to wait until after next year, because if I get blooms on this black lace elderberry, which isn't very black because it doesn't get very much sun, I don't want to cut them off right now. I do want to trim it and shape it, but I think I'm going to wait until after next spring because it does bloom on the old wood primarily. So I just would like to see if that one's going to bloom next year or not. But you can see it's kind of growing at a weird angle here, and it's growing more out than up, and I want to kind of shape it so that it grows more up. So I need to do some trimming on the sides once it blooms. I think I will wait till next year. These heleniums are still growing really well, and I decided to transplant one of the cuttings that I had grown of my firelight out here. Oh, excuse me, not firelight, quick fire. So this is a quick fire hydrangea. This is 2 years old from just a cutting that I took and stuck in the ground. This one also looks like it needs a little bit of water, not too bad, but it's doing good over here actually. So I think it's going to be really happy, and I'm hoping the deer will not find it too pleasurable. So this is where I stole the samurai pulmonaria from, because I have a few out here. I left a few as well because they seem to do really well here, and I just like the way that they look with this beautiful burgundy glowajuga. Also really need to water this viburnum. I guess there's kind of a theme going on in tonight's garden tour, right? Oh, it's the end of summer and I really wish we would get some more rain. I don't want to hurry fall or anything, but it usually is. We usually get more rain this time of year as we enter into September. Hopefully soon. Everything's looking really beautiful in this bed. I do need to come through and do a little bit of deadheading on some of these hosta blooms that have seeded up now. But all the hellebores and the hostas are doing great. I did get a little bit of what I believe is some powdery mildew on a couple of hostas in here, so they're kind of, leaves are curling, and it's the same type of hosta, so I think it's just more susceptible than some of the others, so I may not keep it. You gotta be tough to stay in my garden. All right, the front sunbed. This is fun. I did actually come out and do a little watering out in this bed earlier today, so things should be all right. But just look at these mums and how they're starting to color up, and look at the buds. Holy moly, we are about to see an explosion of fall color. And surprisingly enough, these salvia are all putting up new stalks as well. So I think we're going to get more blooms from those. And I did water those veronicas that I divided and put into the ground the other day. So those are looking pretty good. I think they're hanging in there real well. I do want to cut off the spent bloom stalks still. I haven't done that yet, but that will just help them to quit putting any energy in any seeds that they might be making. And isn't this a pretty combination of colors in here? We have the oregano with the purple blooms, and the mums with the more pink purple blooms, and then the light pink of the sedum. And those tiny purple flowers on the oregano also look pretty next to the bobo. Oregano is a very ornamental plant, but it also can take over an area. So if you have a sunny space for it to fill, the pollinators love it. And it has some beautiful purple flowers, and you can get different colors as well. But yeah, these mums are starting to bloom up. And I have this color of mum throughout the garden. So this sedum right out in front as well is starting to bloom. This one is not so much of a big bloomer as it is more of a foliage plant because of the variegated foliage, because it has a very light white and pink bloom on it. I don't even know what it's called. It was something that I got as a cutting from someone a long time ago, but it is a variegated sedum and it's been around for a long time. My deutzias up front here seem to be struggling a bit with the sun, but I'm going to be leaving them because I think that the soil is going to improve over time here, and that will help to retain some of the moisture that they need. And in addition to that, as these shrubs get a little bit larger, I think they're going to provide a little bit more shade and protection for the deutzias that are out front here. So I'm going to keep them and see how they do next year. Isn't it beautiful how the bobos and the sedum are coloring up together with that really light pink glow? I love it. It's just a beautiful softness in this garden. And then again, we have some of those pink dianthus out front here that are starting to bloom. And I have to tell you, these little salvias that we planted, they have been pretty good workhorses too so far. So just looking good out here. I mean, I'm surprised how healthy and good this bed looks, considering that it's in full sun with all of the dryness that we've had. Now looking at the island bed over here, you can see we have the orange mums in front, which are absolutely popping wide open. Just look at those. They look like orange pumpkins. They're getting so big, and they're nicely rounded. It almost looks like they're in pots still, doesn't it? And I think I'm at the point where I'm going to be cutting back some of these purple coneflowers, because the purple coneflowers for me have served most of their purpose. I've seen lots of goldfinches on them. The activity has started dying back a little bit, but they're also just looking really ratty. I'm trying to leave them, but I have some that are down there and I'm going to leave those. I just think in this garden bed it looks a little bit messy because they're kind of falling over and that kind of thing, and it's making me crazy. So I'm going to have to cut those back. But I will leave the ones in this other garden because they are much more upright. Now I have to say that I wasn't sure how I was going to like this true blue grass. I've got the 3 tufts of them in here, but just look at how well they contrast with that deep dark bugleweed. That's the black scallop bugleweed and the true blue fescue, and they're a nice combination. I love that contrast. And you can see all the little floating Gara blooms that look like butterflies here. Those are so nice. This garden bed is looking a little bit tired right now and ready for some deadheading, but again, there's lots and lots of seeds on all of these coneflowers you see here that the birds are coming in and they're picking off, and I love watching the goldfinches. So these will stay for a little while longer, and I'll deal with the rattiness. And I've got to water the pots that are out here so that the clematis stay alive so I can transplant them into the garden. So I guess there's lots going on, you guys. This area is still looking good, and I have a nice aster that's blooming over here as well. It's one of the purple magic asters, and it just provides a nice little pop of color this time of year. I have to be careful where I plant them because of the powdery mildew that we can get in Michigan. But I think that one looks pretty good. And everything's healthy over here. So, all right, well, I'm going to sign off and I'm going to get to my watering duties, and we will see you next time. Thanks again so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Have a great day. See you soon. Bye.